Hey, welcome back. Today we're going to be taking a look at a more so vintage figure at this point. This is the Palisades Series 1 Kermit the Frog from the Muppet Show. Now, this is a very sought after line of figurines, and I've actually got my hand on the very first one here, which came out a very long time ago. I've been kind of holding off getting these guys for quite a while now, but now that NECA has been making their Sesame Street line, I think now is a good time to get them because I think they fit pretty well in scale, which we'll take a look at in just a little bit. I was always on the fence of also purchasing the Diamond Select figures. However, these figures, in my opinion, have always just been honestly way better than the Diamond Select figures. So we're going to take a look today at Kermit from Series 1. So obviously this is a much older figure, meaning that he doesn't have all the bells and whistles of your traditional action figures that come out nowadays, especially the Diamond Select figures. However, what I think this figure has that the Diamond Select figures don't have is a much more accurate representation of the character. And we'll get into all that in just a moment. So first, let's take a look at his detail here. We're not going to take a look at his box today. I actually purchased him used off eBay. I paid around $35-ish for him, which I think isn't too bad. So if we take a look at Kermit's face, what I really appreciate about these figures, the Palisades figures, is the attention to detail when it comes to the texture of the figure. You'll notice that he has that sort of felt texture on him that really makes him look like a puppet, or he's made out of felt or some kind of soft material. That kind of detail is present throughout pretty much his entire body. Not sure how they achieve that sculpt-wise, but it definitely shows and really just sells the idea that he's supposed to be a kind of puppet, or Muppet in this case. In addition to the fuzzy texture on Kermit here, you'll also notice that there's a lot of very intentional folds and creases in certain spots, especially around the neck and the cheek area, to really show that he is in fact a puppet rather than an organic creature. You can see the detail continues all the way down to his feet. There's not a whole lot of detail to really take in. He's a very simple looking character, but I think he's super accurate. Another thing I really appreciate, of course, are his eyes. He has those unique pupils. He has almost kind of like a hunch, but that is very accurate to the character. As you know, he is a puppet, primarily just a single hand puppet like this, so you can kind of make out where Jim Henson would have his hand in the sculpt of this figure, which I really appreciate. Paint on Kermit is super simple. I'm not sure how much shading goes into the body of Kermit. He just looks to be a solid green. I think he's in fact a little too dark for my liking. He might be a little too dark to be completely accurate, but it's really not a big deal, and I'm sure that others may disagree with me in that regard. You can see the frill around his neck is a slightly brighter, more of like a olive green color, which is accurate to the character, of course. If you take a closer look, you can see even the inside of his mouth is painted with a red and pink color for the tongue. Just a lot of detail on these little figures here. My figure of Kermit here does have a few little mishaps with the paint. It's very hard to see. You might not even be able to see it on camera, but inside his mouth, right around the left side of his tongue, there is kind of like just a white little splotch in there, which obviously shouldn't be. And if you notice around the bottom of his little ping pong eyeball, there is a little bit of white bleeding onto the green, noticeable when you're really just looking at him up close. Otherwise, there's really not any sort of mishaps with the paint, except for maybe this little tiny bit here. There's a little tiny black on his back right around here, which is a little noticeable, a little unfortunate, but that is all okay because overall he's a great looking figure. One thing I do find interesting about the figure, it's not necessarily a bad thing, but I'm sure for a handful of collectors it might be an issue, and that is the fact that when you look at this figure, I think it represents more so the design of the character rather than the puppet itself. And what I mean by that is he's super symmetrical, especially in the face. You'll notice that his face is flawless in terms of symmetry. I mean, there's a little bit of a raised like cheek on the side here, but I recall when I watched the Muppet Show that Kermit is pretty much just a single hand, right? And the felt or the material used for Kermit's head conformed to the shape of Jim Henson's hand. And what that would cause would be sort of an asymmetrical face on Kermit, and that sort of quirk or trait really doesn't come through on the figure here. But regardless of that little gripe, it's a really highly detailed figurine of Kermit the Frog here. Moving into articulation, he does not have a lot of articulation, which is fine. He's just a little Muppet character. He has a swivel in the head. It can pretty much swivel all the way around. You need him to look left or right. He cannot look up or down, however. His arms actually have what appears to be a ball joint and a hinge, so he can get a decent range of motion out of his shoulder joints. Nothing in the elbows or the wrist, but that is fine. It would have been nice because he does have some accessories that maybe could have utilized those points of articulation. He's supposed to have swivel in each of his legs, but I can't seem to move them, and I don't want to force it because if these snap, then I'm going to have to try to buy another one off eBay, which I really do not want to do. And that basically does it for articulation. Not a whole lot to go off of. So he has what, 1, 2, 3, 4, 5 points of articulation, a standard amount for a figure of this time, I'd say. Now he does come with a few accessories here, one being his little mug that says Kermit on it. Now I actually went back and rewatched a few episodes to see if I could find this mug in particular. However, when I watched the show, he had a different style of mug, but you can take that little mug and you can place it into his hand like that. Now what I said earlier about the articulation, he definitely could have benefited from having a swivel in the wrist. As you can see, he doesn't really hold the cup in a natural pose, really, but it's not really that big of a deal. It's nice that he comes with it at all, right? Then his other accessory is this Muppet Show camera, which I guess I'll just bring closer here. Has very nice detail with the show printed nicely on here with the 25 years written below. Now you can actually swivel this, which is really neat, as well as this little control stick or whatever also has articulation as well. Nothing below, but it can stand nicely, and it's just a nice piece to have. I don't know if I necessarily would have Kermit standing with it or trying to operate it, but it's just a cool little like background piece to have with the figure. And then of course his final accessory is of course the Muppet Show 25 years stand, which he does have peg holes in his feet for both little pegs on the stand. Just gotta line that up, and he stands pretty good with it. Not a whole lot of gripes I have about that. However, his legs do stand at a very awkward pose. Perhaps you could heat treat that. If you were to articulate these legs, it would just put them out of the position to work with the pegs. So you might as well just leave them in this sort of awkward position. He's almost like crossing his feet. Regardless, that's really the only big issue I can see on this figure. Overall, he doesn't come with a whole lot of accessories, but what he does come with is very, very nice, and he's just an awesome piece in general. Now, what I'm going to do, I'm going to bring in a few other figures just to go over a size comparison with. Now, Kermit stands at around, I want to say, 3 inches tall, maybe a little over 4 inches. Not a very fitting companion here, but we have Freddy Krueger from NECA Toys. Now, Freddy stands at around 7 inches tall. Now, at first glance, maybe this does look good, but when you think about it, right, Kermit's head is basically just a hand. So if you were to put his head next to Freddy's hand, you can see that Kermit is way, way bigger than he should be. So Kermit, unfortunately, will not size well next to your NECA toys. Being that Freddy's a 7-inch figure, you can obviously assume that 1/12 figures from, we'll say, Mezco or whatever other company definitely will not scale well with this figure at all. Now, if you possibly have a 1/6 scale figure, I don't know who you would put him or who you would put Kermit with, but perhaps you had a 1/6 scale, I don't know, Vincent Price or Steve Martin, right? maybe, just maybe, that would look good. But now it's time for the real comparison I really wanted to make, and that is with the NECA Toys Ernie from Sesame Street. Now, these are very new figures if you somehow don't know about them. Bert and Ernie just came out maybe a few months ago, and the Count, I believe, also just came out this month. As of now, I just have Ernie here. And in my opinion, I think these two scale really nicely with one another. There are some pictures online of Ernie next to the prototypes that Palisades figures made for their Sesame Street line, which never came out. And Ernie is a little bit bigger than that figure, meaning that maybe, yes, he's a little out of scale with the Palisades figure. But when you look at these two together, I can't help but not really see too many issues. Kermit comes up to about his shoulders. Like I said, Kermit's about 4 inches, so Ernie is maybe about 5 inches tall, and I really don't think that is a bad comparison. Kermit has always been a little smaller compared to the other Muppets. Once I get some of the other Palisades figures, for instance, maybe Fozzie or Miss Piggy, we'll also see how they scale with Bert and Ernie. But as of now, I think this looks pretty accurate, in my opinion, albeit maybe he's a little too big by, give or take, maybe a quarter of an inch, maybe half an inch. But truthfully, I think they look great next to each other. So that's just a cool little comparison to have. And one day, probably soon, we'll take a look at the NECA Ernie as well. So overall, the Palisades Kermit is an awesome, awesome collectible. Again, he doesn't have the bells and whistles of a modern figure. For example, comparing him to Ernie from NECA Toys, he doesn't have as much articulation. But for an old figure, the detail on him is great, and he looks way better than, let's say, the Diamond Select figures, in my opinion. I think there's a lot more detail and a lot more personality, and they're just bigger, you know, and they scale nicely with the current Sesame Street line. So all that being said, I think he's definitely worth the hunt. Now, he's not that hard to find. I assume him being Kermit and being in Series 1 of the figure line, you can find him on eBay quite easily. If you're familiar with the line at all, you should know that there's some sets out there that go for a lot and a lot of money. But Kermit here really shouldn't be that hard to find if you're looking for him. Highly recommend picking him up, especially if you're getting the new NECA Sesame Street line. Again, awesome figure. Highly recommend. Go check him out. And subscribe if you want to see a closer look at Ernie, because we're probably going to do that next, and hopefully down the line we'll have more NECA Ultimate Sesame Street figures to look at, as well as the Palisades Classic Muppet Show line. So thanks for watching, and have a nice night.